Hey guys, this is Sebastian Guerra, and today we're going to be talking about how you can save up to $300,000 in just taxes during your entire retirement. I think that one of the biggest concerns that people have as they're entering into the stage called retirement is, am I going to have enough money? But not only am I going to have enough, is my money well invested? And more importantly, how can I keep more of my money in my hands and less in Uncle Sam's? And so in today's video, we're going to be going over a specific breakdown on strategies that people can be using to be able to minimize their taxes during retirement. My name is Sebastian Guerra, president and partner here at Guerra Wealth Advisors, where we help families get to the point where work becomes an option and not an obligation. If you're an individual that is very interested on the topic of taxes and how to reduce your taxes, how to optimize your investments, maybe protect your assets or build a solid estate plan, don't forget to subscribe as we go over every single week on different subjects as it pertains to the subject of money. Let's jump right in. So we're going to be talking about a family, the family called the Martins. They met with us actually a couple years ago, and I wanted to kind of go over their case because I think it's a very unique case that a lot of people that they're entering retirement, they can really relate to, because one of the challenges that people have is that as they're entering retirement, they have accounts spread out in a bunch of different places. They have retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, sometimes Roth IRAs, brokerage accounts, they might have a rental property, they might have primary residence. And so they have all of these things going on in their life. They also now retired. They're now making this decision about collecting Social Security. Maybe you might have a pension and you have these certain bills that you need to cover on a yearly basis. But now the question is, where are you going to withdraw your money from every single month, every single year to be able to pay all of these bills? And so in doing so, sometimes many of us end up overpaying in taxes throughout retirement just simply because we really didn't stop and think about the tax consequences of every single decision that we were making throughout our entire retirement. And those consequences can be massive when you begin to add them up over 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And these consequences not only can affect you and your retirement, but it could also affect your heirs, your children, whoever ends up inheriting everything that you leave behind. And so if you're really thinking about how to optimize your wealth throughout retirement, I really believe that tax strategy is something that needs to be thought about, especially as you're entering this very important stage. So with that said, we're going to talk about a family. The family's called the Martins, right? So they met with us a few years ago. John was 67 at the time. Karen was 65 at the time. They had just recently retired. They had about $1.4 million sitting inside all of their investments and retirement accounts. And their $1.4 million were kind of broken up into different categories. They had about $700,000 sitting inside a traditional IRA. They had about $400,000 sitting inside a brokerage account. And so a brokerage account, if you don't really know how it works, is pretty much a regular investment account that you can put in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. And they had about $400,000 in there. They had about $200,000 in a Roth IRA, which can come very handy, especially for you during retirement and then also to your heirs, because they're also tax-free. So all of the growth that you can have, you don't have to pay any taxes on that. And then I had about $100,000 in savings. So about a grand total of about $1.4 million between all of their accounts. Now, they needed about $85,000 a year to be able to pay all of their bills, be able to pay their mortgage, their taxes, their insurance, travel, food, restaurants, all of these expenses. It was close to about $85,000 a year, but they were already getting about $50,000 a year just from Social Security. That means that they only had a shortfall, which is what we call the income gap, of about $35,000, which wasn't that bad. And so their goal was to be able to continue to generate income on a monthly, yearly basis out of all of their investments and just be able to cover that income gap. And their goal was just to let all of the money keep growing as much as possible. But there really wasn't a strategic plan to make sure that as the money keeps growing and as they're withdrawing money, they're paying the least amount of money in taxes. So what they were currently doing is that, as you can see here, they were right now taking out money out of Social Security, out of dividends, and then out of the small IRA withdrawals. They were also going to let their IRA just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then obviously, many people don't really know about something called RMDs. It stands for Required Minimum Distribution, which means pretty much at age 73 years old, the federal government has this rule. They have this law that if you have like for example, an IRA, you're required to start withdrawing money out of those accounts at 73 years old. And many times the government is forcing people to do this is because they want to make sure that you're withdrawing the money out of it so that you can get taxed on that money before you pass away. So just something really important to think about. Now, the other part was that they had their taxable account was invested in stocks and corporate bonds. And here's a very interesting thing. They were giving about $5,000 every single year to charity, which is also important because if you are an individual that is retiring and you're probably thinking about, okay, I'm giving money to my church every single month, every single year. How can I use this money that I'm giving to my church, not only in a way of giving, but also in a way that it can benefit me from a tax perspective? So we'll talk about a very unique strategy that you or in this couple, they ended up implementing that can save them tens of thousands of dollars in taxes during retirement. And then the last was that they had this Roth IRA, which their plan was to just let it keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually maybe in the future touch it before they pass away. Now, here were the consequences that they were going to have to go through if they left everything according to their plan. Number one, Social Security can be taxed up to 85% of all of their income if they kept going down this path. The second thing, which is super important, is that when you have an IRA, right? In their case, they had an IRA with about $700,000. If they have an IRA and they're just letting it get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, remember, at 73 years old, you're going to be forced to have to start withdrawing the money. And so the bigger the IRA gets, that means there's a larger amount that the government's going to force you to start withdrawing out of the account if you just let the IRA get bigger. And so that was one of the things that was going to be concerning to them. The other part was the dividends and interest from their brokerage account was creating income unnecessarily, and it was adding more income to their AGI, which meant that now they were going to be paying taxes on money they weren't even going to be spending. And so if you follow Warren Buffett's rule, he always says you never want to be paying taxes on income that you are not spending. And that's exactly what was going to be happening to them. The fourth thing was that there was no Roth or IRA conversions in place. And so many people have money inside IRAs, 401ks, but they don't have a Roth conversion plan in place. And that was actually missing. And this added up to about an annual bill of about $12,000 to $18,000 per year that they were going to be paying throughout their entire retirement. And that means that over a 30-year period, they were going to be paying over $370,000 in taxes throughout their entire retirement if they just stuck to their existing plan. So what I'm going to be going over right now are the strategies that we ended up putting in place for them to be able to minimize their taxes. That way we can bring their tax bill down from $370,000 to less than $100,000 in taxes throughout their entire retirement. So here's the first strategy that was put in place. And remember, I think that when you're going through this process of building out your retirement, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on just investment optimization. And what I mean by that is just literally paying attention to your money and making sure that your money is growing. And that's pretty much the only thing that people think about. But a very unique and easy way of getting your wealth to operate at a stronger level is by doing better planning. And so what I'm going to go over right now are a few strategies that you can implement from a planning perspective, not so much from an investment performance perspective, that you can utilize to literally wipe out tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes from the IRS. So the first thing that we implemented is we implemented something called the Roth conversion. And so for right now, he's 67 years old, all the way up until 72. We implemented a Roth conversion plan where we started converting about $50,000 a year from his retirement account, from the IRA, over to a Roth IRA. Now, by doing so, we still brought up their taxes, so they were going to have to pay more, but we didn't let them fall into a higher bracket. So we wanted to make sure that they were kept under that 22% tax bracket. We didn't want them to go up into the 24 or the 32 or the 35%, because now is where you start paying more and more in taxes. So what you want to do in their case is we ended up converting their IRA over to a Roth IRA. And by doing that slowly every single year, there was a tax that was going to need to be paid, but it was going to be paid between the bracket of 12 and 22%. Now, the benefit of doing this was that now that the IRA was actually getting drained and the money was going out from the IRA and it was going into the Roth IRA, remember how we said earlier, at 73 years old, the federal government forces you to start withdrawing money out of the IRAs, not out of the Roth IRAs. So by draining the money out of the IRA, moving it over to the Roth IRA, now your IRA is going to be a lot smaller when you get to 73 years old. The Roth IRA is going to be a lot bigger when you get to 73 years old. So now when the government forces you to start withdrawing that money out of the account, the government's only going to force you to start taking it out of the IRA. And remember, what you're trying to avoid is having a very large IRA, which means the government's going to force you to start to take out a larger amount because the balance is a lot bigger. By the way, if you're an individual that's planning on retiring over the next few years, or maybe you're already in retirement and you just want to make sure that you have all the strategies in place to be able to minimize your taxes and you can optimize your wealth throughout your entire retirement, but make sure that you click on the link below so you can know exactly how you can get access to the Guerra Freedom Plan. This plan will actually walk you through all of the steps that you need to be following to make sure that you have a solid retirement, you know exactly how your investments should be set up, and what strategies you should be using throughout retirement to keep your taxes low. So the second thing that we did is that we repositioned their investment brokerage account. And a lot of people, sometimes they'll say things like, well, you know, I love my brokerage account because maybe I have Tesla in there or Apple, or I have some, you know, some blue chip stocks that pay me some really good dividends. But sometimes we're really not thinking about the tax consequences that these investment accounts are carrying, right? And so if you right now have a company or a stock that's paying you a really good dividend, but you are just letting those dividends still pile into the brokerage account on a monthly or a yearly basis, and you're not really spending any of that money, what it's doing is that you're now creating taxes unnecessarily on money that you're not even receiving in your pocket. And so if you can restructure that portfolio in a way where it can still keep generating growth and interest, but you can minimize the tax impact, that's going to allow the investments to still keep growing without you having to write an additional check to Uncle Sam just simply because of inefficiency in the way the brokerage account is structured. So what we ended up doing is, the first thing is that we ended up selling all of their investment accounts that were paying a very large dividends because they weren't using the majority of these dividends. The second thing that we did is that we ended up restructuring it in a way where we ended up using municipal bonds and very efficient exchange traded funds from a tax perspective. You see, a lot of financial planners, a lot of financial advisors really don't talk to people about the importance of tax efficiency inside their investment account. And so if you do have an investment account, you have a brokerage account, you want to make sure that you're implementing tax loss harvesting throughout the entire year, because by implementing that, you can end up minimizing your taxes throughout the entire year and all throughout retirement. And by going from an inefficient tax portfolio that was creating all of this income, all of these dividends that were not even being used, to a more efficient tax portfolio that was going to allow them to reduce their tax impact by $10,000 per year. So the third thing that you can do is you can do something called a qualified charitable distribution. You see, a lot of individuals that like to give money to their church or nonprofit organizations on a yearly basis, they don't really take advantage of this very unique tax code that's available to the majority of us. And it's something called a qualified charitable distribution. And the way it works is the following. Let's say that right now you're giving money to your church on a monthly or on a yearly basis or on a weekly basis, or you're giving money to charity. Instead of you giving money to charity from your checking account or your savings account, the way most people do, instead what you should be doing is withdrawing the money coming out of an IRA. By you pulling the money out of an IRA and shifting it straight to the charity directly, the money never flows through your hands. And because it never goes through your hands, it doesn't become a taxable event. So in their case, they had a plan of consistently giving $5,000 a year to their church. And instead of giving the money to their church from their checking or their savings account, which there is no tax benefit for doing that if you don't hit the itemized deduction level, instead what they ended up doing is just withdrawing the money out of the IRA and shifting that over straight to their church. Now remember, you must be at least 70 and a half years of age to be able to implement something called a QCD. If you are right now 55 or 65 years old, this is not a strategy yet that you can implement. But by you implementing the strategy, this can literally save you tens of thousands of dollars in taxes throughout your retirement. And it can even help you save hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes throughout your retirement if you're even giving more money. And the fourth strategy that we ended up implementing for them is something called a smart withdrawal order. And what does this mean? You see, a lot of people, as they're entering the stage of retirement, you know, they end up having a brokerage account, a Roth IRA, a IRA. They have all of these accounts, and sometimes people just assume, hey, the best strategy to do is, you know, don't touch the Roth IRA. Let that compound for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and maybe later on in life, I'll end up using up that money. But instead, a strategy that you can be implementing is that you can be living off of your Roth IRA at the very early stage of retirement while you're converting your IRA over to Roth. And by you living off of the Roth IRA money, you can still now pay all of your bills from that. And that can also keep your tax bracket low. So in their specific case, by them implementing the Roth conversion strategy from the IRA over to the Roth IRA, and then withdrawing money out of the Roth IRA on a yearly basis, that allowed them to keep their taxes low. And the other benefit for doing this, which is something you also need to want to be thinking about, is that there's something that's called IRMA limits. And usually the government has this annoying rule that says that once you turn 65 years old and you're getting Medicare, the government will start charging you more money in Medicare premiums that can go over $700 a month if your income gets too high. And so by you living off of your Roth IRA during retirement that can keep your tax bracket low, this means that the government is not going to take that much money away from your Social Security check to pay for those Medicare premiums. Remember, when you turn 65 years old, normally most people enroll in Medicare. And Medicare usually is about $170 to $180 per month that gets pulled out of your Social Security check for most people. But if your income gets way too high, that Social Security IRMA amount that gets reduced from your Social Security check can be literally over $700 a month. And so by you withdrawing money out of your Roth IRA, you can technically keep your tax bracket at a lower level, which means those IRMA premiums don't end up going up to that $700 amount. So in summary, we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of if they left everything exactly as it was and they kept going along their plan, or they ended up making these changes, what is the impact? And the first thing that we ended up noticing is that by them making these changes, they were going to end up paying, instead of $14,000 a year, they were going to go down to $4,000 per year in taxes. That's about $10,000 in savings. Instead of $370,000 in total, they were going to end up paying $90,000 in total taxes throughout their entire retirement. Their taxable investment income was going to go down from $18,000 down to an average of $6,000 a year. Now they changed their charitable gifting strategy that they had. Instead, they moved it over to the QCDs, which helped them as well. Their Roth IRA was originally $200,000. That was their current balance that they were going to end up potentially leaving. Now that Roth IRA is going to be a lot larger when they end up passing away, which means now the heirs get more money because now they've converted money from the IRA over to the Roth. And then if they end up passing away, the tax burden to the heirs is going to be a lot higher in the IRA versus the Roth. And then their brokerage accounts that were invested more efficiently, now the family ends up getting a step up in basis when they end up passing away. And the total tax savings was going to be over $280,000 in taxes by just implementing these strategies. This is why it is so critical, it is so important that as you're entering retirement, it's not just about investment performance. A lot of financial advisors, a lot of investment people will tell you, hey, I can make you 7% or 9% or 15%. And we get enamored with the interest that we can earn on our money, but we're really not thinking about how we can efficiently use our money throughout retirement, where we can efficiently be withdrawing money, where we can efficiently be thinking about taxes and what our heirs are going to be getting. Because when you put all of these pieces together, that's how an effective plan can actually work during retirement. Remember, if any advisor ends up telling you that investment performance is the most important thing during retirement, I would tell you to run away from them. Because what's important during retirement is not just investment performance, is making sure that you have a solid plan for your entire retirement. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you know anyone that is planning on retiring over the next few years, or maybe your children, you want to make sure they're getting prepared for their retirement, because before you know it, they'll be in the same shoes that you might be, make sure you grab this video and share it with them. We'll see you next week.